Hey everybody, let me just hit Shift F5 for a second so I can. Yeah, okay. So, ignore my red hair and my girlfriend in the background doing crafts. This is fake. Don't worry about it. We're having funny because it's a rainy day and my girlfriend bought spray on pink hair dye and we thought it would be fun. Even though I kind of look like a gamer, maybe I'll surprise my students one day and just pop in and be like, new hair. Do you guys like that? Anyway. So this is the semiotic triangle. And so essentially what this is it's a way of using, a way of processing language and breaking down language into its key components. And so you might have think of like connotative and denotative from before. This is similar, but it breaks down something very, very different. So if we make this little triangle, right? Every point has a different thing. So it's basically three aspects, right? But they all construct meaning, right? All three of them. So we have the word in the bottom corner, right? The word is like whatever word we've decided, right? Every language has a different word for things, right? We say phone, Spanish and teléfono, dog, we have dog, cat, we have cat, right? It's just a word, whatever like symbol we're deciding, right? If I decided, if everyone collectively decided to start calling these a table, this glass would then have the name table, right? There's nothing intrinsically with this object that like dictates this symbolic word that we've decided for, right? And so that is the word, right? That is the symbol. The referent is the actual thing. So when I say a cup or a glass, right? This is in real life. Like this is actually a glass. This is in reality, this is what this is, right? In reality, this is the thing, right? In reality, this is a cup, right? I can say cup. Cup can refer to any number of cups. This is the referent. This is the current thing in my reality that this is a cup, right? This is the real referent. There's a real thing that I'm referring to when I say the word cup. That's why it's called a referent. You're referring to it, right? And then lastly is the thought. The thought is our cultural understanding of what that word is, okay? And so to do this, let's do a little thought experiment, okay? The words on the screen right here, they give the example of dog. So we have the word dog. Now, the referent would be an actual dog. I know a lot of you have dogs. I don't have a dog, so I can't do this experiment perfectly. Imagine I showed you, if you have a dog in real life, that's the referent, right? Now, the thought, to understand this more, if you pictured in your head, if you closed your eyes and opened the dictionary up, and there was a picture underneath, if there was a picture underneath, the word dog, what picture would that be? What would that dog look like? Okay. Close your eyes right now. Think for 10 seconds. Just think, what is, if I looked in the dictionary under the word dog, what picture would be there to show me the definition of a dog? Okay. If you've taken enough time to think about it, I guarantee you either thought of your own dog, which is very common, a dog you grew up with, or, and what is very common, I have like 25% of my class will all say golden retriever or lab. Like 25 to 50% of all my classes will say golden retriever or lab, right? And so, we think, because that's the stereotype of a dog, right? I think of like Marley and Me and all these different like dog movies, right? It's always, or like Air Bud, right? It's always a golden retriever, right? I guarantee, unless you grew up with them and they're very ingrained in your experience, I guarantee you didn't say Chihuahua. And the reason is because Chihuahuas, we typically evaluate them based on how culturally we feel about Chihuahuas. And I don't know about you, but culturally, people don't like Chihuahuas. I think they're fine. My grandma has one, but like typically we don't love Chihuahuas. And so if you've ever had, I've had students literally say this in my class before I mentioned this, but I had a grandpa who literally, like, if he saw a Chihuahua, he'd be like, that's not a dog, that's a rat, right? It is a dog. Referently, it is a dog. but because it doesn't get the feeling, because it doesn't match how we perceive it, he is calling it a rat, right? Because it's closer to our idea of a rat than our idea of a dog, right? We are judging an animal, this poor little chihuahua, based on our cultural perceptions of what a dog is supposed to be. And that chihuahua has no idea and has no understanding about why it's getting treated like garbage and why people call it a rat, right? This poor little chihuahua. And maybe now you're like, I don't care. It's a rat. But we are pushing that on this poor little chihuahua, right? And so that's very common, though. We have this understanding or this cultural way of understanding something, um, and that ends up being the way we judge and evaluate things. So this is the aspect of thought. How do we actually think about this word? So, for example, you could think about how we perceive gender, right? The word man, right? We have the word for it. We have the referent, like, I am a man. And then we have the thought, right? How do we actually think about what a man is supposed to be? And so I don't know if you noticed in the first ones, I used to have like painted nails because my girlfriend likes doing them, and I like them. I'm not gonna lie. I have little flowers on my nails right now because it was a Christmas gift. Little stickers I can put on my nails. That's not manly. My cousin wanted to paint his nails. He's like 22, and my uncle, his dad, won't let him. At 22 years old, he's not allowed to paint his nails at 22 because it's too feminine, right? What? Like, he is a man. He's like 6'2". He's like 250 pounds, but he grew his hair long and he wants to, have painted nails, right? But it's upsetting because it doesn't fix our idea. Or even like my dyed hair, right? This is typically seen as feminine, right? But it's something that we associate not with a man, right? It's not in our idea. If I think of the idea of a man, I don't know why immediately in my head I popped out like the brawny paper towel guy, like the the lumberjack with a plaid shirt and a big beard and dark brown hair and a huge jaw, right? But we don't all fit in that. And so maybe you personally at some point, whether it's the word man or the word woman, you haven't felt like you meet that sort of ideal man or ideal woman, and maybe you felt bad about it in the same way that a chihuahua's going to feel bad that people walk by and call it a rat. But it's our idea of it, and it turns out oftentimes the idea of it is more important than the reference itself. And so another great example of this is the word freedom, right? The symbol is the word freedom. Your referent is actual, like, tangible rights that you have, right? You have the right to freedom of speech, right to assembly, right to freedom of religion, right? You have all these rights that are written down in law books. Like, those are referently actually your freedoms, right? Like, in the real world, you actually have tangible freedoms that you can look at and cite, right? But then, what is my idea of what freedom is? And so, what is my idea of freedom, especially in the United States, has a very, like, right, hyper individualized sense of, like, what it means to be free. And so it's interesting to think, like, what does it mean to be free to people personally, to people as a culture? A big one, right, was wearing masks just a few years ago, right? Is it a violation of my autonomy, of my freedoms, even though it's not written anywhere and legally it was fine, right? Legally it was totally allowed. There wasn't actually a referent for the most part, right? But does it violate my sense of freedom if I'm forced to wear a mask, right? Some people fought it. Some people said, freedom to me means I can do whatever I want. And they said, well, you can't do whatever you can't go shout fire in a movie theater. You can't go, hurt anybody else. You can't. You have to wear a shirt and pair of pants and shoes when you go in a restaurant. So why is it suddenly a violation of freedom when you wear a mask, right? It's not that it was technically actually a violation of freedom. It just felt like it, right? It violates our thought, and because it violates our thought, it feels real, right? And it's still real, right? Our cultural understandings end up being real, right? Just because something is like socially constructed, like language, right? Language is socially constructed and changes as the language gets older, and we add new slang and we change our syntax and grammar, over the course of hundreds of years. It's still real. Our language is still real, right? And so this is the semantic triangle. It is one of in semiotics, it is one of the largest, at least in the field of communication studies, how we break down language into its components. And so when you're giving your speech, think about the language that you're using and how you're using that language. A lot of times people make arguments, and the arguments aren't actually have any support or reasoning behind it. Most of the argument is just the language itself. Um, right? If I use the argument that abortion kills babies, it's like most of that argument is just the language that you're using. Like, it's obviously a personal choice, and I'm already regretting going into this choppy area. But right, the word kill, right? What it means to kill, what it means to be a baby, and what even the language choice abortion would be different than the language choice of terminated pregnancy, right? You're stacking your argument with language. And so if you say it in the way that you're framing your language, it's kind of this linguistic relativism that we talked about in the last page, where of course it is. Burke had a name for it. It was called terministic screens. Your language is actually solidifying and persuading your audience just by the way that it's framed. Because if you frame your language in a certain way, that ends up being the filter in which you see everything. So this is a largely supported thing. Again, apologize about my pink hair, reddish pink hair. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that and found that interesting.